is, we've got the recording going. Hold on. We're going to talk about the schedule. Okay. Today we're doing vitality, health, and disease. And at some point we may continue that because we may come up with some good charts to look at. But today we're certainly going to go through the theory of everything. Now, turns out I'm going to be gone. The week of February 27th through March 27th, that whole month, I'm going to have to be out of town for the whole month. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the 3 astrology labs down here to the bottom, April 10th, 17th. They're moved to April. Now, and then Christopher's going to do tarot labs. And then when I get back, we're going to pick up on the astrology labs. And we can't do an astrology lab next week because I've got to help Christopher get set up. So we'll have to do a tarot lab next week. Once I get Christopher, I guess we better stick with what we've got here. Now, if this is a problem for anybody, there's nothing I'm definitely going to be gone, so I can't change that. What I can do is, if this schedule turns out to be a problem for anybody, and I promise we will go through it again. Hi, Laura. And plus, it's going to be online. But we're going to continue with these classes. So this is the new schedule. So we'll do vitality, health, and disease today, and then we'll do friends and lovers when I get back on the 10th, and business, finances, vocational selection. Then we'll do a little bit with progressions and transit. And we may revisit the vitality, health, and disease a little bit with some charts where we can look at progress constant, which is a little beyond the scope of this thing. So, okay, let me look at my, the first thing I want to do is conduct a couple of polls. We didn't get to do this last time, but we're going to do it this time. So, select a poll. So, we're going to do a little experiment here where we do a few polls that you guys can fill in. So, on your screen, you're going to get, the first one you're going to get is I just want to rate your experience with natal chart analysis. So, I'm going to put that up, and then what you're going to do, and I'm going to launch it, attendees are viewing poll in progress. So you guys click on the thing that you think best categorizes your experience with chart analysis. And then as soon as everybody's done checking off the right box, whichever button, checking off whichever button applies to you, Doug can just say whether he's consider himself experienced in chart analysis, intermediate, has some experience with it, and has done some studying of astrology, or is he really kind of a beginner? And I doubt that he's a beginner. You can also say don't know is valid because maybe you don't know. Or maybe it's hard.
Relative.
No, it is very relative. You might be better than you think. For example, you might think you're, consider yourself a beginner, but you're not. Okay, so let's see. We've got 90% voted. So that's pretty much everybody. So
can you read those numbers?
I think I can. It looks like about a third are experienced. And says 33%, and 44% are intermediate. They've done some analysis and studies in the past, and 22% are just beginning their study. So that's pretty good. So I'd say that you know, it's harder on the ones just beginning your study, this class, because it's not a beginning class. But we will do a beginning class. We sort of rotate these things. All right, so that's good. So I'm going to do another poll here. So, no, I'm not managing polls, sorry. So we'll close that. I'm going to close that, and then we're going to do, okay, I want to know how many of you use an astrology program on your computer. And your choices are you use Solar Fire, you use Horoscope, you use Matrix Windstar or Kepler, or some other one that I haven't mentioned there, or you don't have one. Okay, so we got almost everybody that's going to vote. I think we had 90% last time. So okay, so 11%. That's like 11% would be like one. About one person uses Solar Fire. Most people use Horoscope. Looks like maybe one person uses either Windstar or Kepler, and those are both good programs. And then 22% use those.
Other would include Astro.com, right? I lean into that to get my free chart.
Okay. A couple of people use other, and one person doesn't have one. So let me ask you a question out there. The person that's using that, two people are using the other. I wonder if you could raise their hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you use other. If you can remember how to do that. Michael Salter. Michael, what program do you use?
Well, obviously Horoscope is 99% of the time, but I do have a British program called AstroCalc. I've had it for absolutely years, and it does a couple of things that I quite like, you know, but mostly I use Horoscope, to be honest, but it has a couple of things that I think is quite nice. Occasionally I use it.
Yeah, by the way, I use Horoscope as well.
Okay, Bill Keeley, do you raised your hand. Are you something other than what we listed there? Okay, well, we can't hear you, Bill, so.
I think he's muted. He may be muted.
Yeah, he may not have sound or something. Is it Fred Michael? Can you hear me? Okay, well, that's good because, you know, that means that when we use, you'll get some insight in using the Horoscope program. Now, I want...
Just as intermediate, and we use Horoscope Kepler 7.0 Star Professional.
Oh, okay, so that uses three different ones, you said.
Pretty professional.
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, and then let's do one more since this is so much fun. I'm going to close that.
Well, it's kind of nice to know which language we're talking.
And then, okay, this one. Now, basically what we're doing today is we're doing vitality, health, and disease, although we're going to do some preliminary things. And we're spending a lot of time doing all this. But I'm wondering how many of you so far have had a chance to read that chapter, which is chapter 4 in Eclipse 1. So, and it's okay if you haven't read it. This is not, you know, a test. You don't get graded on this. It's just because you could go, you know, you could certainly go read it after we had the class just as well. So, okay, half the people voted. 50% voted. Okay, so it's about, okay, so 2/3 of the class have read it. Well, that's really good. Okay, we're going to close that. We're done with that. We're going to move on. Now, one thing I want to mention real quick last week, and I don't want to belabor it, but, you know, we
Last
went,
week or last astrology?
well, it was the last astrology class. It was 2 weeks ago. Remember, we went through the aspect grid, and we did a couple of them. Now, I did, you know, normally what you would do when you do these aspects, you would start with the sun. You would go through these in order. I think almost everybody knows that. The other thing you can do, of course, is and there's great benefit in doing that, by the way, because as you go through it, you do see all the aspects. And, you know, we used to have a chart like this where, you know, we did all this manually. And, of course, the whole manual process, by the time you got through filling all this out, you had a really good feel for the chart. These days, you know, we do something like with the horoscope. We'll bring up aspect grid for any planet, and of course it already has computed all the aspects for you. And by the way, I'm going to click this little button right here to expand this, and it also gives you the amount of power of each aspect, so you can quickly see which are the most powerful aspects, and the harmony and discord. So there's 2 numbers in each aspect grid. The other thing that we didn't do last week that I just want to mention is talk about parallels. We're not going to talk about them today, but they are also important. And the parallels, as most of you know, all this, if we view the declination, planets that are in the same degree of either north or south. For example, here the sun and the moon are parallel because one's 23 degrees north and one's 23 degrees south. So if they're in the same degree, both north, both south, or one north and south, then that fills out the other part of that grid. Then the only other thing that I think is, we're not going to do this today, but there are lots of tricks to computing aspects. First of all, I mean, you have to know what all the degrees are, okay? And then you have to have kind of a feel if you're looking at the chart for the orders for the chart. But remember, one of the tricks, remember you need to know the triplicities and the quadruplicities. Because that helps you figure out the aspects. There's also 2 other things that are kind of, is when you're looking at 2 planets, when you look at a planet that's really close to the cusp of the sign, it gets more difficult to figure out. For example, here's Mars in Trump's chart at 26 degrees Leo. So if there were a sign, if there were another planet that were just on the other side of it, let's take an example, which would be, if it was at 26 degrees Gemini, it would be a planet that's at 26 degrees Gemini, but a planet that's just a little over Gemini and into Cancer might be sextile to it. In this case, it would be like 5 degrees, so it might not be. But you have to watch that too. And then I want to mention one other thing, just so you know that it exists. When you're looking, if you actually take the time to go through and manually do the aspects in a chart, which is very handy, the 2 hardest to do are semi-square and sesqui-square. Okay. But there's a trick to doing it, how you do it, and I'll show you what that is. The trick, let's take Mercury here, which is 852. Let me use my super duper pointer so everybody can see what I'm pointing. Although I think you can see from the pointer. Mercury's at about 9 degrees. We'll round off. So the way to the way to instantly see all the semi-squares and sesqui-squares of Mercury in the chart is to is to move one sign ahead. So instead of 9 Cancer, it would be 9 Leo, and then add 15 degrees, because a semi-square is 45 degrees, which is a sign and a half. So we add a sign, and then we add a half a sign. So the half a sign we get by adding 15 degrees to 9, that'd be 24 degrees. And then moving ahead a whole sign, 24 degrees Cancer, and then a whole sign would be 24 Leo. So here's the trick. You know a planet that's at 24 Leo is semi-square Mercury. But what that tells you is that any planet in a fixed sign is going to be semi-square or sesqui-square. So all you got to do is look at the fixed sign. You just go around the chart looking for something close to 24 degrees. Here's 26 degrees. Here's Mars at 26 degrees Leo, so we know it's semi-square Mercury. And we look for something else around 24 degrees as a fixed sign, and this is why you have to know your fixed, mutable, all that sort of stuff. And we see up here that the MC is at 24 degrees as a fixed sign Taurus, so it's going to be semi-square. And if there was something at 24 Scorpio or 24 Aquarius, the other fixed signs, then we know those would be sesqui-square. So you could go around the chart, bingo, you can pick out the semi-squares and sesqui-squares. That's a trick I probably somebody else.
Pretty handy.
It is really handy. So now, if you didn't get that, don't worry about it, because in other classes we'll go over that. We don't have time to do that today. I wanted you to know that it existed. What else do we have on here? Okay, one other thing I want to look at before we get into health and vitality. I want to look at Trump's chart real quick, and I want to show you Astrology, because we'll get really so we still look at the Trump chart. It's easy that I got it. I can put up the Astrology. I can also put up, when you get a chart report, you can have the Astrology summary, which gives you the societies, the trinities, the duplicities, and the quadruplicities. Here they're called elements and qualities. And it gives you the total power in each one. So remember that last week we went through and counted all the planets that were in fire signs, earth signs, air signs, and water signs. I don't know how clearly you can see this on the screen. And we decided that most of the planets were in fire and air, and sure enough, you can see that most of the astrodies are in those two things. We also we can see that most of the astrodies are in the wealth trinity. But with regard to, we thought he was both fixed. With regard to the
Sorry, Paul. Can I interrupt?
Yes.
I'm very sorry, but I think it would be a good idea if we could all mute our microphones unless we want to actually speak, because there's a lot of background noise, and I'm having difficulty following.
Okay, we'll do that. I'll go ahead and mute, and then everybody remember to raise your hand. We only have one hand. Fred Michael, I'll close him. So everybody's doing pretty good with that. First is always raised. So. Okay, so I'm going to mute all, and then that should take care of that sound. Sorry, Michael. Okay, you're all muted. Okay, so raise your hand. Okay, well, the point is that, it's great to do the count, but you can also go look. The beauty of Astrodynes is that you can count planets. That was our old way of doing it, like we did. Okay, but some planets are more powerful than the others. The nice thing about the horoscope program is it computes the power. You can see he's got a lot of power in the public houses there. It computes the actual power that in this distribution, these distributions, which can give you sometimes a lot finer analysis than just counting the planets, because some planets are a lot more powerful than others.
So what, he's got 47% of his energy tied up in the public houses?
Right, in public houses, public and personal with very low in companionship, which is basically what we got from counting the planets.
Which is why we're talking about his chart probably right now. He's such a public person.
Well, yeah, he's a public person. It's easy to talk about. I don't know why I picked him, but lately he's on. I don't know. He seems to be on CNN. They like the interview. They love the interview.
You sure it's not Fox?
Yeah. I've been watching Fox lately. It's a good idea to watch it all. Okay, so we're going to move on here. So I'm going to minimize his chart for now. No, hang on, I'm going to look at something. Yeah, we'll look at it later. Okay, so let's move down here to.
I like the none of the above for the inconjunct.
Right, none of you. Right.
It's one sign away from opposite.
One sign away from opposite. That's probably the best way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Now, to do this, I'm talking about vitality, health, and disease. And I hope we get some interaction here. So raise your hand. It's important to talk about some theory. And the Bird of Light teachings, Zeng's teachings are that the astral body is thought-built. Okay? And that the natal chart is a map of that astral body. So the astral body, the theory is that it's thought-built from all the experiences, emotions, and thoughts that it's experienced through prior forms, and that those have accumulated and built up this thought body at the time of birth, and that the planets approximately map that structure of the astral body when the soul is born into physical form. Now, you have to take into account that an astrological chart is a two-dimensional representation of at least a five-dimensional body, because, you know, we live in 4 dimensions. So the astral plane has got at least one more dimension beyond that. So we're talking about a 5-dimensional form that gets mapped into a 2D chart. Okay? So it's difficult, of course. You can get a lot out of the astrological natal chart, but it's not perfect. Also, these thought cells and thought structures that build up the astral body they get grouped together into complex thought structures. But the basic thought cells themselves are built up. They actually have an atomic-like structure. And by atomic, we mean the basic parts that make them up. And you can study that by reading in Course 9 Mental Alchemy. It goes over that structure of how the basic drive for significance gets polarized into two, a positive and a negative expression, which is the reproductive desire and the nuclear desire. And those three things then are the sub-elements that comprise a thought cell. So they get combined in different proportions to make up different kinds of thought cells. So now, the health of these thought cells and structures obviously has a great deal to do with the health, both physical and mental health, of the physical body. And the physical body maps to the extent that the physical materials are available, maps that astral body. Now, I'm just going to mention, because we're not going to talk about this, because we can have a whole class, it would be a really good class, and I should put that down, on the numerous methods that we have for harmonizing discordant thought cell structures. And remember, part of the thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago was, in any chart reading you do for anybody, you can't just tell them what's good and what's bad. You've got to tell them how they can best take advantage of the good and how they can ameliorate the bad, either through conversion, mental antidotes, manipulating the environment, or other means. Okay, now, moving on. There are the planets in the natal chart map the 10 most dynamic thought cell structures in the astral body, and these correspond to the most significant urges that have built up through the evolution of the soul, and they're mapped by the 10 planets. So if we go down to the next slide here. For example, the sun relates to the power urges. So those thought cells are built up and greatly affect the drive for significance. Those thought cells are built up from things which relate to, for example, influence, the vitality, the significance, and the authority, or anything related to vitality and significance and authority, experiences and emotions and thoughts affect the sun. Those affect that dynamic thought cell structure mapped by the sun. Same, the moon rules the domestic urges. So things which affect the mental attitude, the domestic life, and everyday affairs, those things all things relating to those things have built that complex thought cell structure. Mercury is the intellectual thought cells, and so the mental interest, the facility and accuracy of expression, and cerebral activity are what happens when those thought cells are stimulated and experiences relating to them built up those thought cell structures, the intellectual urges. Venus rules the social urges. Mars rules the aggressive urges. Jupiter, the religious urges. Saturn, the safety urges. Uranus, the individualistic urges. So with Uranus, sudden events in the life, things which happen through human agency and that bring change, and those things which help an organism to adapt to sudden change and to come up with new ideas and new things, all spring from those individualistic urges, and those individualist urges, those thought cells are built up by those experiences. Neptune, imagination, sensitivity, and schemes. Then finally, Pluto relates to the universal welfare urges. And those thought cells deal with association with groups, subtle force, cooperation, and coercion. Now, the coercion comes from group pressure, usually. But the things that were the most prominent in 1930 when Pluto was discovered were gangs, racketeering, kidnapping. Kidnapping was big, so that's extreme coercion. All those things were in the news a lot then, and so it was believed that Pluto ruled those things. Okay, so let's finish this up. Now, then there's 12 zones. 12 zones in the astral body are mapped by 12 signs, where Aries rules the head, Pisces rules the feet. And if we look at those, I'm not going to go over this in detail, but obviously anything in Aries can affect the head, the face, the upper jaw, cerebrum, upper hemisphere of the brain. Taurus, the neck. And I won't read all of these, but Gemini is basically the arms and the hands and the lungs. although Cancer is the lower part of the lungs, breast, diaphragm, and stomach. Leo is the spine, back, and heart. Virgo is the abdominal and umbilical region and the intestines. Libra rules the kidneys, ovaries, and in general the internal generative organs. Scorpio rules a whole lot of things, but all the things that Scorpio is all the things that, you know, the prostate, the rectum, bladder. We do talk about this stuff a lot, but it's always kind of yucky kind of stuff. And the external generative organs, the sex organs, and it seems to respond to the nose. So you can often tell Scorpios, people who have strong Scorpio by their nose. I've noticed that they have sort of an eagle kind of a nose, kind of a beak. And Capricorn, the knees, Aquarius, the legs below the knees and the ankles, and finally Pisces, the feet. So, and then finally, there's 12 compartments in the astral body, and you guys know those as the houses. And I've got all those listed here. We're not going to go through all these right now, but the main thing that we're doing here is we're talking about the structure of the astral body, because when you're talking about disease, vitality, and health, you have to understand the theory behind it. Now, just a note on theory in general. You know, theory is a theory. A good theory is one that explains all the facts. It doesn't have to be proven to be a theory. You can have a scientific theory, and it's called a theory because it's not necessarily proven, but it does explain all the facts. And that's one of the beauties of Zane's, how he lays all this out, is that it's a good theory because it seems to explain the facts that we see, including paranormal activity. So much for theories. Okay, so aspects. The aspects to the planets, of course, is what adds power to planets. Besides being in angular succeeding houses, the aspects add power. And by the way, the MC and the ascendant are that particular stellar structures that are important. The ascendant represents a ground wire. It's the place where the astral body is grounded through the electromagnetic body to the physical body. So anything that aspects the ascendant has direct access to the physical body. Whereas the MC doesn't really relate to health at all. It relates to publicity, because anything, any aspect, any planet that aspects the MC gets broadcast to the whole world. So the more numerous the aspects, the more powerful those group of thought cells. And obviously, the harmony or discord of the aspects to a particular planet are what are the main things that determine its harmony or discord. Then we do have malefics and benefics. We've got Venus and Jupiter, which is minor and major benefic, and then Mars and Saturn, of course, is a minor and major malefic. But those can be even made harmonious with good aspects. So the harmony and discord of the aspects, and here we're talking about semi-squares, squares, sesqui-squares, opposition. Those are discordant aspects. Whereas semisexual, sextile, and trine are harmonious aspects, and the rest of them are neutral. So what happens to discordant aspects is that whenever there's an aspect between two planets in the chart, that maps a stellar area between those two groups of thought cells. And And just as the length of an aerial or antenna in the physical world depends upon how well you can tune antennas to pick up certain frequencies. So when you have an antenna connected to a TV, we don't use it much anymore, but it was important that they had the right length so that they would pick up the signals harmoniously without static. The same thing applies to these aerials or antenna that are formed by aspects between two planets. They pick up energy either harmoniously or discordantly, depending upon how the aspect is tuned. And they can feed that harmonious or discordant energy down into the thought cells, and they make them feel happy or sad. Now, these aspects can pick up more than just astrological energies. They can pick up character vibrations. So things in the environment can also cause activity. For example, the nature of other people's personalities can stimulate certain areas in the astral body. Certain kinds of stones, music, certain minerals, are known to be ruled by certain planets, so they will stimulate certain areas, certain planets in the astral body, or they relate to signs and they stimulate a sign. So if there's something in the environment, say, that stimulates a sign of the zodiac, say Taurus, then what happens is it stimulates any planet that's in that part of the astral body. Okay, in this case it would be the neck region. So if you get a precious or semi-precious stone that is ruled by or vibrates to Taurus, and you wear it, then the theory is it'll stimulate the planet that's in Taurus. So if you have a very harmonious planet in Taurus, then you want it. And I don't remember which stones or what things relate to Taurus, but that's the idea. And so the amount of activity of any particular group of thought cells is a combination of their natal power and then their progressed power and then any environmental influences that I just mentioned.
Are character vibrations the same as environmental influences?
Yes.
Synonymous?
I'm saying character vibrations are synonymous. They're not exactly synonymous, but that's what I meant by environmental. And by character vibrations, I mean environmental influences. And we could switch them around here, but that's right. So we're not, Vicki?
I'm wondering, is it significant with music? Maybe it would be good after you go through the slide to ask people if they have any questions.
That's a good idea. I can unmute everybody. Okay, then we're not going to talk about progressions, but we are going to have a class at the end of the series where we look at progressions, which are tremendously important. I mean, you have to understand your own natal chart, and you want to know all of the key aspects in a chart, in your chart, for example. You want to be able to write down exactly how that expresses in your life. And if you haven't done that, go do that, because it's quite a little exercise. You don't have to do every aspect, because a lot of them are minor. But the important aspects in your chart, you write down exactly how that expresses in your life. And if you don't know how, then that's a little exercise to go figure out how it does. Now, but progressed aspects then are the movement of the planets in the chart after birth as they make aspects to each other into the natal planets. They build temporary stellar aerials in the astral body between the 2 or 4 terminals that are involved in the progressed aspect and pick up energy in the environment and astrological energies and feed them down to those thought cells and stimulate those thought cells on the inner plane to attract events using their psychokinetic energy. And so it's not only the psychokinetic energy that's going on, but there influencing you physically, and they may relate to health. We're going to talk here next about what things actually are the most important things for influence, health, and vitality. So I'm going to temporarily unmute everybody, and then we'll mute them again. Oh, I guess I can't. Uh-oh. What does that say?
Oh. This is all.
Oh, that's for hands. That's for hands. You have to, you can't unmute everybody.
You can't one at a time, maybe?
That's not very.
Okay, well, but you guys can raise your hand. Somebody raise their hand. Ask a question.
How do you unmute them though?
Or you do it one by one. Well, we'll see if somebody raises their hand and has a question. Because I'm looking for interesting questions.
What about,
Was it the person above saying, Michael?
Yeah, it's for, oh, there's Renee. Let's unmute Renee.
Hi.
Hi, Renee. You have a question?
Well, no. I guess you said somebody raised their hand.
Oh, okay.
I know.
All right, well,
when I first look at a chart, I am of course putting this out for your opinion of it, but I look for my first house and my ascendant and my sixth house, and I guess my own chart, which is the chart I know the best, I can see so clearly my two aspects of my physical body are just perfectly illustrated in my birth chart. And I guess I also wanted to say, though, you know, like wherever Saturn is, whatever house Saturn is, do you find that is like I sort of think maybe the house expression, even though we look for the cusp, is it more the cusp? Because the actual house, when we get Saturn in the house, do you ever look for the health and vitality to see where Saturn is, Paul? That's my question. There's a question.
Well, okay, that's your question. Then, well, no, I look to see, yes, whatever house Saturn is in is going to, you know, be subject to work, responsibility, and economy or loss, okay, for sure. Okay, if it's in the house of friends, then you might not have very many friends. The ones you have might bring you a lot of work and responsibility. You might have to take care of them. They're always whatever. You know, those are the kind of things to expect. Certainly, Saturn can have a big effect on the health, but it depends on where it is in the chart and what aspects it makes, particularly the Sun, Moon, and Mercury. So let's go to the next chart here.
I think I saw another hand up too.
Well, that was, yeah, there's Michael. So I'm going to unmute Michael. Wait a minute, it's not unmuted. What do you got?
It's below the name.
Michael, did you have a question?
Hi, sorry, I'm unmuted now. I must have unmuted myself. Hi, sorry, it sounded a very good question there, actually. So I don't want to disrupt the proceedings here, but I just wanted to mention that, especially I think in regard to health and vitality, not only a discordant planet, but a weak planet, you know, a planet that hasn't got a great many aspects, or because of its house position, can be something that could indicate a sort of a health problem. So it's weakness as well, which is an interesting thing, I think. It's not only discord, but weak, being a weak planet, not having many astrodynes, as it were. So I just think it's one factor.
That's absolutely correct.
That holds true for,
And that's exactly the reason. Now, we're going to start summarizing all this stuff here now, but that is the reason, for example, other than the sixth house, for example, which relates to, we're going to talk because it's people get confused about how to interpret the sixth house, because the sixth house relates to illness, But more generally, the conditions surrounding illness, not necessarily the fact that they're going to be sick. However, a planet in the 6th house tends to be weaker because it's the weakest house. So a discordant planet in the 10th house is better than a weak discordant planet in the 6th house because, as you said, it's a weak area in the astral body, and therefore there can be a tendency to illness. So
would all the, what's the term for the ones that are before the angular houses?
succeed.
No, wait, angular? Cadence. It's the last of the three. So the 6th house wouldn't be any weaker than any other cadent house, right?
Well, the 6th house is no, yes, it is weaker than, it is the weakest house.
Weaker than the 9th house.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
I
weak.
didn't know that.
Yeah, right.
Why is that?
Below the horizon.
Well, if you look at a chart, if you look in, I don't think I have that chart, of house power. In fact, if you could find it in course 16, Solar Healing, it'll give the exact amount of astrodynes that you get in a house. And they're different. The 1st and the 10th are more powerful than the 4th and the 7th, for example.
Okay.
And the 6th among cadent houses is the weakest of the cadent houses. And so Zane's gone, and through research that he's done, he's actually got the sort of variation in house power. Okay, so, and then of course, the closer you are to the cusp, the more power you get for that house, but the maximum you could get, say for the 6th house, is a much smaller amount than, say, for the 9th house.
So when you're looking at astrodyne, it factors in house position as well.
That's right. So when you're looking at the power of the planet in astrodynes, that power of that planet is a function of its house position, the house it's in, and how close it is to the cusp of that house, plus the power of all the aspects that are made of that planet. The sum of those is the total power for the planet. Okay, so, and another thing, any planet that's prominent in a chart can be a beneficial influence, source of talent, or a significator of disease if it's discordant. But by far the most important of the planets is the sun and the moon. The sun rules the sun rules the vital electric force, whereas the moon rules the magnetic constitution. And you can think of them as sort of two poles of the electromagnetic body. Now, the metabolic processes of the body generate an electromagnetic field, not to mention the electrical activity that goes over the nerves, which are ruled by Mercury. And that electromagnetic body is the agent of transmission between what's happening on the astral and the physical. Now, you have to take some care with extrapolating these terms. These are excellent terms for understanding the influence of the sun as being the vital electric force of the chart, which is a positive force, whereas the moon is a negative receptive terminal that affects mainly the magnetic constitution. And they're sort of like the two poles of a magnet that create this field, okay? And it's a very good way to talk about them, but I just want to warn you, you can't, when you start talking about electromagnetic fields and electric forces and all this, you're dealing with physics. And so you don't want to get too far because you'll get outside the realm of physics, and we're just trying to use low velocity terms to describe a high velocity body, and it's not a perfect match. That's all. Okay.
So the metabolic processes, and that's the interaction between those vital, electric, and magnetic.
Right. Well, there's this whole electromagnetic body that's built up from all the activities of the cell and the nervous system. Any individual cell, those metabolic processes generate electric because they have charged particles. In fact, they work, by particles that go back and forth between membranes, right? That's how a lot of that stuff happens. And so, polarized particles are an important part, and polarized particles are what generate electric fields. And moving polarized particles generate magnetic fields. So it all adds up together. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, the factors that are the most important in determining vitality, health, and disease are the moon, first of all the moon, then the sun, then the first house, and the ascendant, and the sixth house. The moon is the most negative receptive terminal in the body, and it is the place where impressions from the environment, both the astral environment and to the extent that they get across that electromagnetic boundary from the physical environment. Both those is the easiest avenue for the person to receive impressions about the environment. And so all those things build up a terminal of this very receptive terminal that has a big influence on not only the unconscious mind, but the health, because it rules the magnetic constitution. Now, Zane says that, if you have a strong, vital chart, meaning a powerful sun that makes lots of aspects, you can have a weak constitution and live a long time. But if you have a weak sun, sometimes even a strong constitution can be overcome by certain diseases. So, and he talked about how, some people have lots of little, go through a very long life with never being without some pain or suffering, every day. Okay, so the moon maps this place where impressions enter the final form, and it also rules the constitutional magnetism. So aspects to it, its placement on the chart, are very important. The sun, to the extent that it's strong and harmonious, greatly helps length of life and rules the vitality of the person. So it's sort of the dynamic positive force that's acting that creates the other half of this electromagnetic body. Hmm? Okay. Well, I don't have to answer that. Hey.
Hello?
Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you fine.
No, I only raised my hand. It was during the discussion of the relative house power. For some reason, it popped in my head that I think is also taken into account the fact that a house may be above or below the horizon, or east or west.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's on the weaker side
Well,
of the horizon, the sixth house.
Yeah, you're right.
And where do you think?
We all agree with you.
Stellar
Well, it's in stellar healing. 16, there's a chart, because stellar healing is where you learn to do astrodynamics. It's got all the explanation of how to do astrodynamics, part of which is you got to know house power for planets. First thing you do is calculate house power, and then you start adding up all the aspects. So Shane's got, Shane?
Yes.
Did you have a question?
I just want to know, how about retrograde planets? How does that affect you or your health or your astral body? I have a lot of retrograde planets in my natal chart.
Oh, how do retrograde planets? Well, To my knowledge, retrograde planets don't impact health. What does Zane use? What's the keyword he uses? Oh, they're repressed. You know, I've never quite myself. I really look at retrograde or direct. You know, what Zane says is that retrograde planets tend to be repressed. So they're it's kind of similar to planets that are in intercepted signs, because which he says they tend to be latent tendencies. Well, repressed tendencies, I guess, are different, and why they're repressed, I don't know. But as far as I know, there's nothing relating to health. So, no, I don't think retrograde planets would have any impact on your health, Shane.
Okay, that's what I know. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Renee's got her hand up.
I don't know if it's a, I like to look at retrograde because the planet is apparently moving backward from our point of view on Earth, as though it advises us to be more yin, more receptive, more not trying to push the river so much as accommodate and adapt to what we're brought and given, if that helps.
For retrograde planets?
Yeah, if that helps us take care of ourselves, our health, you know, we can have a more, see what information reaches out to come to our attention, follow guidance that we intuitively feel resonant with, etc., instead of, you know, using the plow ahead mentality to pull in and accommodate and digest information and stuff. I don't know if that works with Zane's teaching, but it feels resonant to me.
Michael, did you have your hand up?
No. I thought I put it down. Perhaps I haven't. No.
Could he hear any of that?
Yeah,
Michael?
Yeah, he heard it.
Does he resonate with that at all?
Michael, did you hear what?
Do I resonate with that? It's an interesting. Yes, that's an interesting way of viewing the retrograde planets, I have to say. I mean, I find, you know, the keyword repressed quite difficult sometimes to understand how that energy could be. I think maybe, I mean, Christopher mentioned that where he saw the retrograde planets is that maybe they manifest their energy a little bit later in life or come to the fore later in life. And I think that's kind of sort of resonates with me, that concept, that perhaps it comes to the fore slightly later in life. It's something that doesn't sort of is less noticeable early in the life, maybe. So I don't have many retrograde planets in my own chart, actually. So.
Hi.
Okay, Vicky's got. Hello. Renee, do you have a question?
Hi. Well, I just had a thought about the retrograde planets, and so often we just see that little R beside the planet in our computerized chart, and I wonder how often those of us that are looking at our own charts, if we look at the ephemeris and we see that little SD close, you know, sometimes those planets that we consider retrograde may actually be really, really slow and almost, you know, stationary when they're changing, like those more distant planets for us, the ones that are moving from being retrograde to direct and being stationary, because Zane did say a little bit about that being a very powerful position for the planet to be in, so still as the Earth is, moving around. And that key word is, I don't know if I've heard anyone mention that keyword latent, which is a much kinder word, and I really understand it because I feel like my love for astrology, which is religion of the stars, really slowly over my life became, more and more important, and it seemed like, because that's my retrograde, slow, distant planet in the 9th house, it really expressed. So I don't know if that just, we don't often look at the ephemeris to really see, well, when did it go direct?
Right.
When was it?
That's
so
right.
Your look deeper into your retrograde planets. And the other thing, I was just curious, just because my weakest part of my body is really, I'm just curious, everyone here knows their chart, and I'm just curious as if you look on whatever sign you have on your 6th house cusp, whatever part of your body that rules, I'm just curious how many people in our little group consider that to be a weak area of their health or their body?
You mean a weak area in your astral body, whatever sign's on the cusp of the 6th? Is that what?
No, well, your physical body. For instance, I have Taurus on the 6th house cusp, and that's definitely the weakest part of my body is my neck.
Okay, that's what I thought you said.
Yeah,
okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay, let me ask, hang on there, Renee. Let me ask if anybody else has noticed, I'll say that I have Pisces on the cusp of my 6th house, and I have very sensitive feet. I mean, they're
there you go.
I have to be, some people, they go buy a pair of shoes, and, it's no big deal, but mine has to be just right. So maybe that, if anybody else has an experience like that, raise your hand. And then, Vicki, you had your hand raised.
With regard to the refreshed planet,
Yeah.
my dominant planet is retrograde. And I have pondered that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've observed about myself over time is that given that planet, it's really harmonious. It's up in the 10th house. I would have thought I would have gone out and really pursued a career and a public life.
Right.
But I have had zero desire to do that.
Right. Yeah, I've often wondered about that too. That's a good. Vicki's dominant planet is up in the 10th house. It's Jupiter and it's retrograde. And while she does get a lot of great press for all the great things she's done for the Church's life in latter years, I always had the feeling that as harmonious as that is and making all those, that you would have been great out in the business world.
Right.
You have a great business sense, and you got all those planets in the 6th house trying at Jupiter up there. But you never, it was just not, didn't happen, it wasn't there.
To do it.
Yeah.
And I had plenty of opportunity.
Yep.
Well, and you've made a career of filling a religious niche here.
Right.
But
it's not a highly public.
Right. But you moved in to fill it with flying colors, So.
Yeah, no, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's a good example
I
of
think
what
that's
I've
a
been
good
talking
example
about,
of
like letting it come to you, being more responsive to what's offered you to respond to and fill the niche rather than creating the niche yourself with that forward motion. I'm going to do this, it's my ambition.
And let me say something else about refreshed planets. What Renee said is very true, that, it might be marked, like if you do it, I haven't looked to see how solar fire does it, but you see in the old days, when they had an ephemeris, it would be marked as retrograde, and then it would go direct. But it, like in the Die Deutsche, and I think in the American ephemerides, they never marked, they said stationary. I never.
Only if it's that very day, right? You'd have to look up.
That's the whole point. Is a plant, when you do a very detailed down to the second or tenth of a second of a degree of where a planet is and how fast does it ever stop moving? Well, actually, no. I mean, there's probably always some motion as it goes from retrograde to direct and vice versa. So at what point is it stationary? Well, that you have to define that. If you're going to do it in a chart, you have to tell a computer, well, if it's only moving this fast and over this period of time, then we'll call it stationary. Otherwise, it's either retrograde or direct. So I never fooled around with that because, if it was clearly retrograde, then I just mark it retrograde. I've never read any exact definition of what stationary means.
Yeah, but Renee's point can be extended to the planets move with differing degrees of forward motion. I remember getting a chart once that had been done on some program I wasn't familiar with, and it told me that my moon, when I was born, was moving very fast.
Right.
And I thought that's fascinating, and that would be true of any of the planets. You could tell if they were moving fast or slow.
Right, that's right.
That would be.
You bet the only thing I look at is the ascendant, if the ascendant moves fast or slow. You can look at, and of course there's a table that gives the average motion of the planets, and you can go compare the motion of the planet on the day you were born over a 24-hour period with that table and see whether it's a fast planet or slow. And he actually does talk about planets which evolve, which those characteristics, if it's fast, especially the ascendant, things develop faster than if they're slow. Let's move on here. Okay. Right. So, okay, the moon. So, any aspects of the moon can affect the mentality, and the receptivity and the magnetic constitution. So, it has an effect on the health. And depending upon where the moon is in the chart, determines on the things that the impressions, the habitual mode of how a person receives those impressions into the unconscious mind of all the things that are happening around it. And aspects of certain planets mean that they're readily absorbed into the unconscious mind. Now, aspects of the sun are particularly important for length of life. For example, Zhang says that a harmonious aspect of Jupiter to the sun and any aspect of Mars to the sun gives length of life. And but in general, the more powerful, more harmonious the aspects of the sun, then the longer the person tends to live, and the easier it is for them to overcome illness. Whereas aspects of the moon tend to indicate discordant aspects, difficulties in certain areas of the constitution, and which is different from vitality and being able to overcome disease. And then the next importance is the first house in the ascendant. So any planet in the first house, first of all, it's the most powerful house, is going to have some impact on the health. And depending upon the aspects that it's made, whether it's discordant or harmonious, determines that impact on the health. Now, any planet that is particularly prominent in the chart, we'll talk about prominence here again, but planets, any planet that's powerful and makes a significant aspect to the sun or the moon is going to have an impact on health. So it's going to be good or bad. So you can be sure of that. And then, if there's a planet in the first house, it has conditions surrounding health because it affects the physical body and the nature of the physical body. So it has to do with health. So you really have to sort of balance all these factors. And finally, the sixth house. Those things, the sixth house has to do, having a planet in the sixth house, other than it might be weak, does not necessarily mean you're going to have illnesses. The sixth house relates more to the conditions surrounding illness because it relates to illness, it relates to food, and, you know, I left out Mercury up there. I'll get back to Mercury here in a minute. It relates to food and assimilation of food in the body, and so that it's really the conditions surrounding illness is what planets in the sixth house typically denote. Okay, and if there were a lot of planets in the sixth house, you might think that somebody was going to have all kinds of different illnesses. But in fact, Vicki has how many planets in the sixth house? 4 planets in the sixth house. So she's pretty darn healthy.
And you're
very
a
healthy.
health-conscious person.
She's a very healthy. That's a good point too.
And she takes care of her diet.
That's
and
a
all
good
that.
point. All of that stuff, diet, and your thoughts about health and illness. And the sixth house also has to do with conditions surrounding health. I mean, the environment that you get sick in, or that you deal with people who are sick, because it's not just you, it's other sick people. All those experiences in dealing with illness go into that compartment of the astral body, mapped by the sixth house. So,
can I just
things relating to hospitals.
sorry, interrupt you rudely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just mentioned because I have 5 planets in the sixth house. Touch wood, my health has been reasonable. 5 planets. But I actually, for the last nearly 5 years, I've been a carer for my wife who is ill. So it certainly is, maps that. I just thought I'd just mention that very quickly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So that's an excellent point. And then Renee's got her hand up. Renee.
Oh, I was just curious now with Vicki and if that was Michael, but what sign is on your sixth house cusp, and are all the planets in that same sign?
Yes, mine are all in Leo.
Those are all in Leo. She's got Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto, all pretty close conjunction there in Leo in the sixth house. And
So
then trine or Jupiter, yeah.
So your sun and your vitality and they're all pretty harmonious.
Right.
But let's see, I've forgotten what area of the body Leo is all of a sudden.
The back and the heart.
Heart and spine.
The spine, yeah.
And how is yours, Vicki?
Well, I think they're okay. I'm
Right on.
65 and they're so good.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad because it's really hard to have a bad back or any kind of thing like that. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. What sign is yours in, Michael?
Well, Leo's on the cusp of the sixth house as well, and well, I have had a bad back recently, but actually my back's been pretty good. Touch wood again. Yeah, I've had no real problems, and I've been very lucky in that direction. Although, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, Leo has always been to me a very healthy sign, no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sun connection, yeah.
And typically the sun, you know, the sun will map a vital area in the astral body. if it's not afflicted. Now, the one thing I didn't mention here is Mercury. Zane considers Mercury also. There's really 5 factors here. Mercury is very important because Mercury rules the thoughts, has direct access to the nervous system, and can the mental activity in the unconscious, particularly the unconscious mental activity ruled by the moon, is capable of being turned in a certain direction. And Mercury does that. So Mercury can channel your thinking into a certain direction. So it actually performs 2 functions. You can direct your thinking with it, which can be very helpful to keep from experiencing discordant thoughts and emotions, but it goes the other way too. So everything that you're thinking, that mental food feeds your astral body. So, you know, it's important what you eat physically, and that mental food is also very important. So I'm going to feed all here. We're getting some, let's see, I don't know where that sound's coming from. Have to figure it out. Okay, so, well, we've got a few more minutes here. One thing we could do, which I haven't done, so I'm going to bring up, since we've been looking at let's just scope this out a little bit here. And okay, let's look at, now, I didn't mention prominence. You know, besides looking at astrodynes, so we'll look at, we've got Trump's chart here. We've got the power thing selected, so it's got to rule by power. Prominence, the general rule is if it's in an angular house or it makes good aspects to the sun or moon, it makes a planet prominent because it's going to have a big impact on your life, especially your health. Okay, well, let's just look at Trump's chart here. Now,
we're looking for health.
We're going to, yeah, health. So let's look at, first of all, let's look at the sun and the moon. Now, the sun and the moon are the 2 most powerful planets of this chart. So they're both strong. Now, moon is a little discordant in its opposition to sun. Of course, we don't know what illnesses he's had. I don't know anything about that. Maybe we'll try and I'll try and look at that sometime. But I'd say with that strong and fairly reasonably harmonious sun, his health would probably be pretty good. The other thing we can
also got Sun sextile Mars.
Right. Yes, Sun is sextile Mars.
So
Sun is
that
Gemini.
bodes well for his vitality.
That bodes well for his vitality. It also bodes well for length of life. And look at this, he's got Sun trine Jupiter down here too. So he's got a good aspect of Jupiter and any aspect of Mars.
Why is that when Mars is a malefic?
Because
It gives you spunk and fight.
Right.
And, you know, you're,
Even if it's tough.
it adds to that electric vitality, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, Zane gets that from the old Brother White Research Department, where they looked at hundreds and hundreds of charts, and they found that people who lived a long time often had either harmonic. They found that discordant aspects of Jupiter to the sun didn't add to
Mars to the sun?
Jupiter.
Oh, okay.
They found that any aspect of Mars to the Sun correlated with long life. The only harmonious aspects of Jupiter.
Okay.
Because, you know, I guess discordant aspects of Jupiter brought, you know, maybe overindulgence of some kind, or, you know, stuff that might, you know, certainly impact the health. So he's got all the factors for being vital, having a long life. He's got a strong constitution. He's got a full moon, and that opposition is considered to be discordant, but you know, it's so well drained because, see, he's got this. The first house is probably, I don't know if it's actually sexual. It's probably out of it. Certainly Mars, which has an impact on his health. The ruler of his personality. Mars in Leo is the ruling aspect of his personality because of its close conjunction to the ascendant, and the fact that it drains that opposition between the sun and the moon, I guess, makes him pretty darn healthy. Of course, we don't know much about him, but okay. We're at the end of our session here, and I'd like to get comments from anybody. Raise your hand if you got questions, you want to make comments, and especially if you want to talk about the schedule.
At some point, are we going to maybe be able to bring in charts and let the group be able to look at them? And
well, that's a good idea. Bring in,
have someone have to chart, like maybe Michael would like to have look at Jenny's chart.
Well, that's a great idea. Okay, Renee's got her hand up. I'm going to unmute her. Renee?
Oh, I just had a little brainstorm. This was the health and vitality class, but I just was, I guess it's my Neptune, imagining how cool it would be to have, you know, maybe 4 different charts, and if you could collect 4 different charts and know what someone's health issues were with each chart, and then have the list of the 4 different health issues, and like they could just be anonymous, but maybe a few of us know of a chart that has a health issue, and then try and you know, match them up as amateur or us astrologers.
Well, yeah, I'd love to do that. I think that would be great. And in our next class, you know, if we had some charts, I tried to find some good charts. I just didn't have enough time to go through and find. But Vicki found a couple. Let's see, that we might look at next time, because, you know, if you're looking at when you're talking about health in Course 16 Stellar Healing, it has all the natal and progressed constants for a whole bunch of diseases. I don't remember, but a pretty good slew of diseases. So what we could do is we could take these charts. So you're suggesting, Renee, that everybody try and find some charts of maybe somebody who's been sick or had a certain illness, and we can compare them with what the various natal and progressed constants are that predispose to that particular disease. Is that what you're saying?
All of a sudden, my concern would be that it would encourage like an idea that, you know, because a chart can express so differently, and I'd hate for it to encourage an idea that this position of a planet or something like that could, you know, be a little fatalistically, you know, because.
Oh, well, yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't like it to lead to that. But I guess I've often thought about, you know, the medical.
Go ahead.
Well, the medical profession just, you know, when you could include that with understanding, especially psychological type issues for the health of different individuals. I know I've looked at a few charts of children that I've worked with and had the opportunity that their parents have given me the accurate birth data, and it's
well, okay, let me repeat what you said there earlier, or what I thought I heard you say, is that you were suggesting that you have to be careful telling somebody that they have a predisposition to a certain disease based on what they have in their chart. Is that what you were saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
but my idea is sort of like a little exercise of, you know, sort of like I've often tried to imagine a doctor, you know, if they could anonymously let you have some birth data if they had it, and say this person has this and that person has that. Who do you think had which one? And I thought that would be, you know, kind of a very interesting thing to do.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Now, let me say something first of all. When you do somebody's chart, I would agree that you wouldn't tell them that they had a predisposition to cancer or some other terrible disease, but certainly for discordant planets in their chart, you don't have to talk about disease, but you can go to Personal Alchemy, Course 21, and find out the best things to eat. And you can tell them how to use mental antidotes. And you can tell them actually quite a lot of things that they can use in their life without telling them that they have a predisposition to any particular disease, because really, you don't know. You know, Zane says that before a disease occurs of a particular kind, you're supposed to have the natal constants and the progress constants in effect for that disease, in addition to having progressed aspects of the first house and the sixth house. But I would agree with you with that. But you can tell them how to, you know, best harmonize that particular aspect of their chart and what to eat. Yeah. Okay. Then I'll come back to this other thing. Glenda, let me unmute Glenda.
She's still muted.
I think it takes a while. What is it? Glenda.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yes, another thing that would be interesting, and I think you said you were going to cover some of this, is when people have progressed aspects that are hitting, and those are also aspecting maybe, for example, some kind of aspect natally and triggering off things. And, you know, it would be interesting to also talk a little bit about how to apply then those antidotes and conversions to those sorts of situations. Is one using prayers, or I mean, that could be if you have a nice Jupiter, but just some ideas about how to go about that process, because I think, as you said, we have a mental diet and a physical diet, and so that, for me, would be very interesting.
Right, that would be interesting. You know, I think for some of the more serious diseases, you know, you got to start early in life reconditioning those thought cells, because once you get something, then you know you got a real problem. You know, I mean, and you know, I think we need a lot more research on this. Let me.
Holly?
Yeah, let me Holly, are you there? Let me undo her. Holly, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, Paul, I don't want to say my disease is, but I think you may know I have an inherited disease, and if possible, I'm very interested in maybe using my chart as one of the charts.
That would be great.
That we go over. Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there if it's possible.
Okay, why don't you, that would be great. Why don't you, and that's you know, and I had in my notes I wanted to talk about, you know, obviously genetics is another thing that plays here. And we don't understand exactly how the interplay between the astral body is mapped by the birth chart and genetics play out. I mean, does the soul attract the body that's got a genetic predisposition and it's already in the chart, or do you have to take it? You know, these things are pretty tricky.
Yes.
So, but yeah, if you'll send me your chart, and then and then
maybe other people could send charts too.
And then I think what Renee was saying is, you were proposing that we have several charts, and that we try and match them to the particular disease by looking at the chart.
We could use ourselves. Oh, let me.
Yeah, you can do that yourself. Right, yourself. Well, yeah. Holly, send me that.
How about if we didn't say what the disease was, but just using the signs and the planet, or at least for mine, and just, or maybe do say what the disease is, I'm not sure, but just, you can definitely see what area of the body is affected in mine, and it's...
Yeah, well, let's do that.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't tell us what the disease is. We'll look at the chart, and we'll see what we do. So,
Great.
You know, if you'll email me your you know, time and date of birth, and also tell me where you got that time.
Definitely, I will. And then I also, when my disease became prominent and affected me greatly, I can send you that, well, it was by transit, but I can send you that date and that transit as well. I don't know if we want to go that far into it, but it's something kind of simple.
I think that would be great. We could look at your your progressions and your transits.
Great. Okay, I'll do that. I'll get that to you, and I'll get the date that it seemed to kind of worsen.
So, and anybody else out there who has a good chart that they know of somebody that has a particular disability or disease, why don't you send it to me? And then when we have our next class, which by the way is a ways from now, because it's not going to be until April 10th, then we can start off by looking at that. You know, we can continue this discussion and move on to the other stuff. So I know that's a long ways off, but you know, you'll get an email and everything reminding you of what to do. But Vicki has her hand up.
I want to know if they're all good with that, because that is a big change.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about that? I know this is, you know, I feel. Anyway, it's the way the world is, so we're going to have to deal with it. But if anybody's really upset about that, why don't you get that out of your system now?
Well, would we be bumping?
Okay. Michael raised his hand. Michael.
Hi. Well, obviously it's a great shame because it seems so exciting at the moment right now. But, you know, I'm sure the Tarot Lab is equally going to be great fun and exciting. So, you know, I think, you know, I'm okay on that one. But I certainly will be looking forward to what we've been discussing sounds really exciting, I have to say. So great. I think it's great.
Well, I'm enjoying it. I'll say that. Okay, so then Renee.
Oh, I was just going to say, you have my blessing there, Paul. Life, love, and light.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, well, let's see. If there are no more questions and comments, I'm going to sign off. Now, I will be here next week, and I'll be at Christopher's Tarot Lab, because I got to make sure he it gets all set up and knows how to do this, phone conversation, go to webinar stuff, so that when I'm gone, everything will go nicely. So anyway, signing off here, and I've really enjoyed this. I'm so glad we got some good comments and everything. Glenda, did you have something to say?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you. I think that it's going to work out. It seems like a pretty full schedule. I hope we can look at charts, and again, I hope we can look at the progressions and how they and how we can work with mental. What is it? Mental alchemy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So I'm going to add that to the schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that's very important. Is how to deal with discordant aspects in a chart. What are the different methods and what you can actually do? And we have to get real practical. It's very easy to kind of stay theoretical with all this. So you have to have some very practical examples, and I'll try and come up with that.
That would be good.
And you guys, can help me with that, because
right.
A lot of you are pretty familiar with that, and you can share your knowledge about things. And I'd like to particularly talk about conversion, because that's one of my favorite ones, and I think is the simplest one to do for a lot of things. So, okay. Anything else? Anybody? Turn Glenda off there. Okay, then I'm going to sign off. Good night, everybody. It was great fun. I look forward to our next thing.
Good night.
Michael, did you have something?
No. Thanks very much. Wish you all a very happy good night.
All right. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. You're welcome.
Is there any way that we can print out some of the side things that,
This is your chart.
yeah, well,